Good afternoon. Phil Lindeman with your Krystal 93 News from Vail Summit Orthopedics and Neurosurgery. We are looking back on the biggest stories of 2022. On June 24th, exit 205 in Silverthorne shut down for a standoff that, well, here's the story. A 3-hour standoff in Silverthorne ended with no one in custody and thousands of detoured motorists.
Moving very slowly. I don't know what's happening up by the interstate, but you can see the flashing lights. But it's quite the mess.
That's a Krystal listener from 8:30 this morning. A half hour earlier, employees were clocking in at the appliance factory outlet at exit 205.
We didn't really see much. We came in, clocked in, and got the phone call from the county to evacuate, and that was it.
Around the same time, police were swarming Blue River Parkway just outside the exit, closing the road for the next 3 hours. Silverthorne Police Chief John Miner.
We located a vehicle that was related to a domestic violence suspect out of Idaho this morning. We thought he was in the vehicle. Obviously, out of an abundance of caution, we closed down the road.
By 9, sheriff's deputies arrived with an armored vehicle. They told the man to come out with his hands up multiple times and got no response. A witness.
Just seeing like a little bit of not really a standoff, but the cops are holding this guy in by gunpoint, telling him to come out, and he hasn't really come out. Who's to know if he's really in there, or we don't know what's going on.
By 10:30, the armored vehicle approached the truck and an attached trailer, followed by 3 deputies on foot. They broke a window on the camper and searched inside with a mounted camera, finding nothing. They broke open the trailer, again finding nothing, and searched the camper topper, coming up, all clear. Chief Miner.
He's not in it. We don't believe he's a danger to the community at large. We're going to open back up the roadway, and we're going to continue our investigation and see where he's at.
A manhunt is now underway with no leads.
You know, he could have been armed at some point in time, but that might have been in Idaho. We don't know. We can't confirm. Okay. So, at this point in time, we have cleared, like I said, his camper.
This was the latest on Nordemeyer from August. Police are adding drug possession to the list of charges against Jason Nordemeyer. Nordemeyer remains on the run, wanted in Idaho for violent crimes, and now Colorado for drugs. Cops found psychedelic mushrooms in his empty truck. As of today, Nordemeyer remains at large. This September, another frustrating case was solved with help from a deputy coroner and retired detective. In January 1982, 2 Breckenridge women, Annette Schnee and Barbara Oberholtzer, went missing. Yesterday, at the Park County Courthouse in Fairplay, their suspected killer, Alan Lee Phillips, faced a jury.
You have to be patient and persistent, and we finally came to a successful conclusion. Yesterday, we got a guilty verdict on all counts, 4 counts for each woman.
That was Wendy Kipple, a career detective and deputy coroner for Park and Summit counties. She joined the case in 1989, the same year Charlie McCormick came to Breck from Denver PD.
For some reason, it just wouldn't die. There was always something that needed to be done. If you're going to do a professional job of investigating, there was always something to follow up on.
Annette and Barbara, known as Bobbie Joe, were 21 and 29 when Phillips shot them to death and dumped their bodies near Hoosier Pass. Many, including their families, were convinced Bobbie Joe's husband, Jeff, was guilty.
As a result of a couple of years' investigation, we're pretty confident that he was not out of his house in Alma at the time of the murders.
The hunt for the killer led Kipple and McCormick to 12 states, Canada, and the UK. Their best evidence was a piece of Bobbie Joe's clothing, marked with the suspect's blood.
We just kept testing it, and nothing would come up.
38 years after the murders in 2020, Kipple sent the samples to a genetic database.
And it took her over a year to comb through over 13,000 individuals.
A match led them to Phillips, a retired car mechanic, now in his 70s. They tailed him for 5 weeks at his home in Dumont, just an hour's drive from where his victims were found.
We finally got a surreptitious DNA sample and compared it to what we had on the evidence items, and it turned out to be a match.
Phillips was booked for murder, kidnapping, and robbery in 2021. After a 3-week trial and mountains of testimony,
they came back out in 4 hours and 45 minutes with a guilty verdict.
Is that relatively quick for a case like this?
That is very quick. For a 40-year-old murder case, that is really fast.
I think it's a good example of police work, is that or anything in life really, you have to know when to hold them and when to fold them, and in this case we went the right way.
McCormick, now 83 and still living in Breck, says this is his final case.
I think in my case, or in a lot of cases that I've known other cold case detectives work, is that you're just really concentrating on the truth. You're trying to find out what happened and who did it. Pretty basic stuff, really.
Phillips is sentenced in November and faces life in prison. His attorneys plan to appeal. On November 8th, a judge gave Phillips a pair of life sentences. He will die in jail. In other crime files, U.S. Marshals arrested Miles Tovar this October after a 3-month manhunt. He is accused of killing his roommate in 2019. Summit Middle School gym teacher Leonard Grams is going to trial this coming April for allegedly fondling underage girls in class. He says he is innocent. A convicted sex offender, Indiana Blake, serves 4 years to life in prison after pleading guilty to years of abuse targeting friends of his family. A Dillon Valley man was cited in May for nearly shooting a neighbor while reportedly cleaning a rifle in his apartment. The two had a history of bad blood. In 72 hours over Thanksgiving, 2 people in separate incidents were booked for allegedly spitting on and kicking at cops after taking drugs in Keystone. This October, candidate Chris Scheer for Summit Sheriff accused incumbent Jamie Fitzsimons of using campaign money from a committee that did not exist. The state then agreed with Scheer, giving Fitzsimons until November 3rd to reply. By then, he had won the election. Today, Fitzsimons tells us he replied in late November. The state told him that investigation is ongoing. The state, meanwhile, has not told us anything. An open records request is pending 2 weeks later. In sports, the Broncos have fired head coach Nathaniel Hackett less than a day after a beatdown by the Rams. Hackett went 4-11 as head coach. Now CBS Sports reports general manager George Payton could be on the chopping block as well. No official word on Russell Wilson's future. His contract is good through 5 years. And in local sports, your days of free parking at the beach are numbered, unless you bring friends. Starting Saturday, Arapahoe Basin is charging $20 for solo skiers and riders at the Early Riser lot on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Cars with 3 or more people park for free. The upper lots are free for anyone. Phil Lindemann with your Krystal 93 News from Vail Summit Orthopedics and Neurosurgery.